Convening the Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. It is Thursday, March 4th at 2 p.m., 2:02 p.m. in conference room 325. First on the agenda, the only thing on the agenda, is HB 391 HD2 relating to the Residential Landlord Tenant Code. First up testifying, we have the Hawaii Association of Realtors with comments.
Aloha. Thanks for allowing me to testify. Most of the language in the bill is already covered by the SCRA and reflected in the HAR standard rental agreement. HB 391 additionally inserts that service members should also be allowed out of an off-base rental lease should they become eligible to live on post without penalties or fees and with a 30-day notice on fixed lease or 15-day notice on month-to-month terms. Previous testimony suggested that this timeline is adequate for landlords to find another tenant, but that's not true. It's a burden upon the landlord when given short notice of a tenant vacating. When vacating is not an option due to military orders, SCRA provides shorter notice terms to the landlord. However, HB 391 provides an even more lenient notice when vacating is optional. The SCRA's notice ruling is barely adequate notice to the landlord. To minimize that further puts more stress and undue hardship on the landlord. For non-military tenants, notice to vacate on a month-to-month lease is 28 days. We ask that you consider revising HB 391 to reflect this minimum notice versus the proposed 15-day notice. We also suggest that the terms of a fixed lease should be honored when vacating is an option. Some military housing allows service members to defer acceptance of on-base housing without losing their place in line until they have completed the terms of their current off-base rental lease. Service members should consult with their housing program to determine eligibility. They should also communicate with landlords, potential landlords, that they are on the list for on-base housing so that parties may negotiate for a shorter term lease. In this way, the landlord has more time to be prepared for the eventuality of losing that service member tenant while also supporting the service member's needs. Anyway, that's what I've got. And I thank you again for allowing me to testify and your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Yep, thank you. Members, we have a number of individuals, 6 individuals in support and 1 in opposition, but the only one here to testify is Levi Ho'okano in support.
Aloha, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Matayoshi, members of the committee, thank you for having this hearing today on this measure. Most of what I have to say is in my written testimony. I just want to emphasize that from what I see of this bill, the main purpose is not to penalize landlords or anything like that. And it's actually a little bit different from the SCRA. But the main focus, I think, should be on those service members who have to move back on post because they're losing their housing allowance. And I would support an amendment to narrow this bill to those situations. The primary one that I can see are those junior service members who get divorced and don't have custody of any dependents post-divorce. Because those junior service members, E5 and below, which is your sergeant to privates, they are required to live in the barracks. And they would have to, basically by losing their housing allowance, they wouldn't be afford to live off post and pay for that rent. So I would be in favor of this bill being narrowed to us those situations where they're ordered to live on base because they're losing their housing allowance and not just because of convenience of moving on post, because I believe that it's also tough for landlords and it's not really an ideal situation for everybody in that case. Just to be clarified, the Service Member Civil Relief Act, that covers termination of leases when a service member is going to PCS to leave Hawaii or get deployed. This is a little bit, I would like this bill to be a little bit different situation, separate from the SCRA. That's everything else is in my written testimony, and I'll be available for questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. That's all the testifiers we have. Any questions? Rep. McKelvey.
Thank you for the realtors. You there? Let's see, Tracy, yeah?
Yes.
Hi, sorry. To Levi's comments about amending the bill to narrow the scope to situations that he described, what's the reaction of the realtors to that suggestion?
I don't know, I just stand by what I said. You know, people make mistakes.
Well, no, it seems to me.
We fully support the service members and we want to help them out as much as we can, but you know, I mean, I don't know how to put it delicately, but is it our fault if they get divorced? I mean, is it the landlord's responsibility to take care of that in a situation where they didn't choose the correct partner? I mean, it's, you know, the guidelines are already in place to allow the service member a shorter time to give notice. But, you know, on a fixed lease, you know, they should just negotiate a shorter term if they're, you know, they know what their situation is and they need to find out what their eligibility is through their branch of service and work with that and work with the realtors too. You know, and then that helps everybody.
Thank you. Rep. Nakamura, did you have a question?
Yes. Also with for Tracy from the realtors, wanted to just clarify that you are recommending that the timeline be moved from 15 days to 28 days. Is that correct?
Yes. That's a reasonable time. And that's what any, you know, any non-service member would have to give on a month-to-month notice. You know, what that 28 days notice or a month notice is, you know, allows the person to get out a reasonable amount of time and allows the landlord a notice that, hey, I mean, they're on a month-to-month lease. So the landlord is already aware that, you know, at any given time, the tenant can give 28-day notice. So they have that awareness already. So at 15 days, that's just like, oh, hello, hurry up and rent your place. You know, the landlord has a budget too, you know, and it's easy to re-rent it when you have the right people that come in the door, but it's not always that easy.
One of the landlord attorneys said that what might be the fallout, or I guess the unintended or fallout from this bill is that there would be shorter leases, that landlords may ask for month-to-month or shorter lease terms. Do you agree with that?
Can you say that again?
Well, that if this bill should pass, that landlords, if renting to a service person, may ask for shorter leases or month-to-month leases. Do you agree with that? That might be one of the repercussions of this bill.
Yes, but that might be a better way to go. You know, it kind of helps the landlord to know, you know, where the tenant stands and when they, you know, that they might have to leave early for other situations, you know, if they're going to get on base housing or if they're on the list, or, I mean, they don't know if they're going to get divorced or not, but you can't really work with stuff that you don't know is coming. But yeah, that's a definite possibility that they'll ask for shorter term leases so that they can negotiate with and juggle whatever else they've got going on with the service.
Members, any other questions? Rep. Ward.
Thank you also to the realtors. How big is the economic pie we're talking about? What part of the market is actually fulfilled by the military? How much of our housing do they represent? I know there's 100,000 dependents, or no, wait a minute. There's 100,000 something with dependents and the active military. What percentage of them have housing? I'm just trying to get an economic indicator. Would you have any of that from the Realtors Association? How much money we're talking about rather than rights and privileges?
I do not have those statistics, but I'd be happy to get the answer for you and forward it on when I do.
That would be very helpful, being that federal spending is an integral part of our state economy. And you said earlier, or in your testimony, that hey, this this issue is really already covered.
Well, for the whole bill, there's a lot of stuff that's repeated that is covered by the SCRA. And then the bill does add this additional portion about, getting out, being able to get out of the lease if they get on-base housing.
And what's the average stay of the normal military attachment or assignment to Hawaii? Is it 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
Understanding is it's two years, but
I should probably be
Yeah,
asking the
I don't
military.
have any military in my family, so I could check on that.
Does Mr. Chi represent the military? No,
He's the
Mr. Ho'okano?
he's landlord attorney.
landlord attorney. Because it would be nice if the military weighed in on this, to see some of the stuff. Anyways, thank you very much. Wise decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ho'okano, did you want to weigh in on that?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Although I am a member of the military, employed by the Army, I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here in my personal capacity. So I'm not speaking on behalf of the military or the government. But from what I know of, for those who are assigned here, it can vary between 2 years to 3 years, and they can extend if they incur an extra obligation. Some senior members are assigned here for about 2 years. Most junior soldiers are assigned here for 3 that I've seen. With regards to the housing, the number of military in housing, my focus is on the junior soldiers. They are only allowed to live off post with housing allowance if they're married or they have dependents, or if they're an E5 or below. Anybody E6 and above will generally be allowed to have housing allowance, and even if they get divorced, maintains their housing allowance in some capacity. The junior soldiers, they don't have a choice. 90% of the time they'll get moved back into the barracks and will then have an outstanding lease off post. It's those soldiers, I think, that are the most vulnerable. Those E6 and above, they qualify for housing allowance on their own, even if they do not have dependents. They'll lose some of their housing allowance because there is a with dependent rate and a without dependent rate. And so if they get divorced, they'll get moved from the with dependent rate to the without rate. So their housing allowance will go down, but they won't lose their housing allowance. It's those junior soldiers that will lose it.
Thank you. Members, any other questions?
Could I follow up with that, Chair?
Rep Ward.
If I know you're not the commanding officer, but what would the commanding officer say to what you just said in terms of what is in the best interest of their troops?
Rep Ward, I can't speak on behalf of the commanders,
I'm sure we want on behalf of the Army.
but
Don't-
there is this thing called the exception to policy, where a soldier can petition their commander to let them retain their housing allowance if they were to lose it, and that's at the discretion of the commander. They can make that decision based on whatever information they have. That's completely within their purview. I can't comment as to how often that happens, but it's a route that's available for those soldiers.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Members, any further questions? All right, seeing none, I believe we're going to do decision-making or defer decision-making until after the 2:15 agenda, which is right now. So adjourning this and convening the 2:15 agenda of Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, Thursday, March 4th at 2:15 in conference room 325. First up on this agenda is HB 339, relating to the family court. Members, we do not have any testifiers in this measure. So with that, we will recess for decision-making.
2021. Here for decision making. First bill is House Bill 339, House Draft 1, relating to, I'm sorry.
Actually, it is that, Chair, because we're doing that agenda first. And then we'll
Are you doing?
after, so.
Yeah. Let's find my 2 o'clock agenda. Okay, first bill is House Bill 391 related to residential landlord tenant. Chair's recommendation is that we adopt the proposed amendment by Levi Kano with regard to making the requirement both 1 and 2 in order to shorten their lease. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 391 HD2 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ichiyama?
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi?
Aye.
Representative Lopresti?
Aye.
Representative Lowen?
Aye.
Representative McKelvey?
Aye.
Representative Nakamura?
Aye.
Representative Takumi? Excused. Representative Todd?
Aye.
Representative Tokioka? Excused. Representative Ward?
Aye.
Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. House Bill 339, House Draft 1, related to the family court. Chair's recommendation is that we move this out as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as is.
Chair,
Yes, Representative Ward.
I'm going to side with the CJ on this one. He said that the Supreme Court should be not the proper one to get these issues. So I'll be voting no on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, as is.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 339 HD1 as is, noting the previously excused members, any members voting with reservations. Noting the no vote of Representative Ward, any other members voting no. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. And members, finally, House Bill 576, House Draft 2, which was previously heard on March 3rd, 2021. Chair's recommendation is that on line 3, page 3, line 19, add to the bill, notwithstanding HRS 453-16 or any law to the contrary. And then make the bill effective upon approval. Members, any questions or comments? Representative
Chair,
Ward.
there's still some of us in the legislature that believe life begins at the early stages of conception. And I know there's been a issue about access. Well, it's because so many physicians have decided not to use abortion. So if that trend continues, eventually, if this does pass, the APRNs will opt out of it, and then we'll have to go to a different, perhaps, level of expertise. So for those reasons, no. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 576 HD2 with amendments, noting the previously excused members, any members voting with reservations. Any members, noting the no vote of Representative Ward, any other members voting no. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much, members. We are adjourned.